The dining room table was set with heavy porcelain, silverware that had seen 3 generations of family meals, and an atmosphere thick with unspoken decisions. Lara Marsh sat quietly across from her younger sister, Chloe. She could tell something was coming. Her father, Arthur Marsh, cleared his throat with a deliberate, performative gravity that usually signaled an announcement he expected everyone to accept without question. "Lara," Arthur began, resting his hands flat on the polished mahogany. "Your sister is pregnant." Lara didn't blink. She looked at Chloe, who was staring down at her napkin, playing the part of the vulnerable, overwhelmed daughter to perfection. Chloe was 20, unemployed, and had dropped out of 2 different colleges over the previous 3 years. Lara, on the other hand, was 22, had spent 4 years working 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a pristine GPA, and was 3 weeks away from paying her first tuition installment at Columbia Law School. "I see," Lara said, her voice remaining entirely level. "We need to make adjustments," Arthur continued, leaning forward. "Family supports family when life happens. Chloe needs a home. She needs stability for the baby. Therefore, the $92,000 in the educational trust is being transferred to Chloe's account tonight." The air in the room seemed to vanish. $92,000. It was not just a number, it was 8 years of meticulous planning, late-night studying, and sacrificed summers. The money had originally been set up by Lara's late grandfather, explicitly intended to fund the advanced education of the family's first law student. But because Arthur was listed as the primary administrator on the account paperwork, he held the legal authority to sign off on distribution changes until Lara reached her 25th birthday. "That fund was set aside for law school, Dad," Lara said, keeping her tone completely devoid of anger. Arthur's face hardened instantly. He hated being questioned, even politely. "Law school is a luxury, Lara. A baby is a life. You are smart. You are capable. You can get loans. You can work. Builds character. Chloe doesn't have your resilience. She needs this. You don't." For 3 long seconds, the dining room fell dead silent. Her mother, sitting at the head of the table, kept her eyes glued to her plate, refusing to intervene. Chloe offered a tiny, practiced sniffle. Arthur sat tall, waiting for the outburst, the tears, the shouting, the accusations of favoritism, so he could shut it down with his usual lectures about selfishness. Lara took a slow breath. She looked at her father's rigid face, then at Chloe's quiet satisfaction. In that brief moment, a quiet clarity washed over her. Arguing would change nothing. Pleading would only validate their cruelty. Lara placed her napkin beside her plate. She stood up. "Okay," Lara said softly. Arthur frowned, visibly thrown off by the lack of resistance. "Okay." "Okay," Lara repeated. She walked around the table, stopped behind her father's chair, and leaned down. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders in a calm, gentle hug. "If you believe this builds character, Dad, then I accept it." She stepped back, gave Chloe a small nod, and turned toward the stairs. She walked up the wooden steps with steady, unhurried strides. She reached her bedroom, closed the heavy door behind her, and stood in the dark space for a second. Then her phone vibrated in her palm. A bright notification illuminated the screen. It was an automated bank alert from her personal financial institution. Alert: scheduled trust verification triggered. Account status modified. Lara unlocked her phone with an unwavering hand. What Arthur did not realize was that her grandfather had not been a foolish man. When he created the primary $92,000 trust, he had also established a secondary joint contingency account tied to his personal estate, an account that was set to execute an automatic freeze on all secondary family assets if the primary administrator made a non-educational withdrawal before the beneficiary turned 25. Lara had discovered that legal clause 6 months prior while reading through her grandfather's old estate filings. She had never mentioned it to Arthur. She had simply uploaded her law school acceptance letter to the automated banking system 2 weeks ago, activating the conditional terms. The moment Arthur executed the transfer to Chloe downstairs, the trust algorithm detected a breach of the educational mandate. Suddenly, a sharp, frantic scream echoed from the floor below. "Arthur! What happened?" Her mother's voice shrieked through the floorboards. "The main account. Everything is locked. The bank says the entire home equity line is frozen." Lara stared at her phone screen as another alert popped up. Action completed. Asset protection protocol active. Downstairs, heavy footsteps rushed toward the kitchen phone, followed by Arthur screaming her name in a mix of panic and rage. "Lara! Get down here right now." Lara didn't answer. She quietly placed her phone on her desk, sat down, and opened her laptop. She didn't go downstairs. She didn't engage. She simply packed her bags that very night, walked out the front door before sunrise, and took out full student loans to cover her tuition. She did not call them back. She ignored the frantic voicemails, the angry texts demanding she fix whatever error occurred with the family accounts, and the emotional guilt trips accusing her of ruining Chloe's future. 8 years passed. 8 years of grueling silence. 8 years of 80-hour workweeks at a top-tier corporate litigation firm in Manhattan. 8 years of paying off high-interest student debt dollar by dollar, building a life from absolute zero without a single cent of family assistance. Lara Marsh had built her reputation as one of the most ruthless, highly detailed corporate restructuring attorneys on the East Coast. She didn't yell. She didn't lose her temper. She simply found the structural weaknesses in every contract and dismantled her opponents with surgical precision. She had completely erased her former family from her daily existence. She changed her personal phone number, moved into a quiet high-rise, and focused entirely on her work. Until a rainy Tuesday evening in November. Lara was reviewing a major commercial debt acquisition file in her corner office when her private assistant knocked on the glass door. "Lara? There's a man downstairs in the lobby," the assistant said hesitantly. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he's been sitting there for 3 hours. He says he's your father. He looks quite desperate, honestly." Lara didn't look up from her paperwork immediately. She slowly capped her pen, set it down on the leather blotter, and looked at the rainy city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Send him up," Lara said calmly. 10 minutes later, the office door opened. Arthur Marsh walked in, but he was no longer the imposing, dominant man who had dictated terms at the dinner table 8 years ago. His hair was thin and completely gray. His suit was slightly worn at the cuffs, and his shoulders were hunched under a heavy burden of stress. He stood in the doorway of Lara's massive, spotless office, staring at his daughter, now an impeccably dressed, powerful 30-year-old woman sitting behind a desk worth more than his entire dining room set. "Lara." Arthur's voice cracked. "Sit down, Arthur," Lara said, her tone professional, cold, and entirely void of affection. Arthur walked over and practically collapsed into the leather chair opposite her. He looked around the room, trembling slightly. I had to track you down through the bar directory," Arthur stammered. "Lara, please. I know we haven't spoken. I know how things ended 8 years ago. But the family is in absolute ruin." Lara leaned back, lacing her fingers together. "What happened to Chloe?" Arthur let out a shuddering sigh, hiding his face in his hands. "The money, the $92,000, it was gone in less than a year. Chloe's boyfriend left 2 months after the baby was born. She never worked. She kept needing more. I had to mortgage the house. I had to take out personal loans to cover her debt, and then my own logistics company started failing." "And you want me to give you money," Lara stated calmly. "No, well, yes, but it's worse than that," Arthur pleaded, his eyes wide with terror. "A corporate investment group bought up all of my business loans 3 weeks ago. They are foreclosing on the house. They are liquidating my entire company on Friday. I will be bankrupt. Your mother and I will be homeless. Chloe and her child will have nowhere to go." Arthur suddenly slid off his chair, dropping heavily to his knees on the carpet in front of her desk. Tears spilled over his aged cheeks as he reached out toward her desk, begging like a man on trial for his life. Please, Lara. I'm begging you for forgiveness. I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake 8 years ago. I shouldn't have taken your fund. Please, save your family. Lara sat perfectly still, looking down at her father groveling on the floor. Her face remained unreadable. Slowly, she opened the thick leather folder resting on her desk and turned it toward him. You're right about one thing, Arthur, Lara said softly. You made a terrible mistake. But your mistake wasn't 8 years ago at the dinner table. Arthur blinked through his tears, looking down at the legal document stamped on the desk in front of him. Your mistake, Lara continued, was not checking who owned the investment firm that bought your debt. Arthur Marsh stared at the document sitting on the glass desk. Paper was crisp, bearing the official seal of Apex Capital Solutions, an institutional asset management firm based in Manhattan. At the bottom of the page, above the line marked Managing Director and Chief Legal Counsel, was a signature written in sharp, unmistakable script, Lara M. Marsh. The room became intensely silent. The only sound was the steady patter of rain striking the office windows. Arthur's hands trembled as he pushed himself up from the floor. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white, his eyes wide with utter confusion and rising panic. Apex Capital is your company? Arthur whispered, his voice barely audible. You bought my business debt? Apex is a private litigation fund that I co-founded 4 years ago, Lara replied, her tone as calm as if she were reading a routine status report. We specialize in distressed corporate assets. When your logistics company defaulted on its second mortgage 6 months ago, your primary lender put your remaining loans up for private auction. I personally authorized the purchase of your entire debt portfolio 3 weeks ago. Arthur gasped, taking a staggering step backward. You knew? You knew it was my company? Of course I knew, Lara said, leaning forward slightly. I have monitored your financial filings every quarter for the last 6 years. I watched as you refinanced the family home to cover Chloe's credit card debts. I watched as you used $40,000 of my original college fund, not for Chloe's child but to pay off your own failed stock margin calls. Did you really think I didn't know where that money went, Arthur? Arthur's face drained of all color. The defensive lie he had maintained for 8 years, that he had sacrificed Lara's future solely to protect a pregnant sibling, instantly shattered. Lara, please, Arthur stammered, his hands shaking uncontrollably. I was desperate back then. The market crashed, I was losing everything, and I had to make a choice. I thought you were strong enough to survive it. I thought you would understand. I did understand, Lara said smoothly. I understood that you valued your own image and Chloe's comfort over my future. You sat at that dinner table, looked me in the eyes, and told me that taking my hard-earned trust fund would build my character. You told me that hardship was good for me. She stood up slowly, smoothing the front of her tailored dark suit. She walked around the large desk, stopping just a few feet away from her father. So I took your advice, she continued softly. I worked 3 jobs while taking 21 credit hours a semester. I slept 4 hours a night on a broken couch in a damp basement apartment. I survived on instant noodles while carrying over $100,000 in high-interest private debt. I spent 8 years building character, Arthur. And this office, this firm, and the legal ownership of everything you possess, this is the character I built. Lara, you can't do this to your own family, Arthur begged, tears falling freely down his withered cheeks. Your mother has nowhere to go. Chloe has a 7-year-old child. If you foreclose on the house, we will literally be on the street by the end of the month. Is that what you want? To put your own flesh and blood on the street? Lara did not flinch. She picked up a second folder from her desk and opened it. I am not a monster, Arthur, she said. I am a lawyer. I deal strictly in terms and contracts. Here is what is going to happen. She handed him the papers. First, the home equity foreclosure proceeds as scheduled, Laura instructed clearly. The house will be sold at public auction on Friday. However, I have established a fully managed restricted living trust for Mom and Chloe's child. A modest 2-bedroom apartment has already been leased in their names for the next 5 years. The rent will be paid directly by the trust. They will have a safe roof over their heads, basic medical coverage, and a monthly stipend strictly audited for groceries and essentials. Arthur looked up, a faint flicker of hope returning to his desperate eyes. You're giving us a place to live? I said I created a trust for Mom and the child, Laura corrected cold-faced. You and Chloe are explicitly excluded from benefiting from that trust. Arthur froze. What? Chloe is 28 years old, Laura stated without a trace of pity. She has never held a job for more than 3 consecutive months. Starting Monday, if she wishes to remain in that apartment with her child, she will be required to enroll in a full-time vocational training program and work at least 30 hours a week. The trust will cover her childcare expenses but not her lifestyle. She will learn to earn her own living. And what about me? Arthur asked, his voice trembling with horror. What about my company? What about my retirement? Your company is being fully liquidated on Friday morning, Laura said firmly. Every vehicle, every warehouse lease, and every piece of equipment will be sold to satisfy the outstanding creditor obligations held by Apex Capital. After the liquidation, your personal debt balance will be officially zeroed out. You will not owe a single dollar to any bank. She stepped closer, looking directly into his tear-filled eyes. But you will have no company, Arthur. You will have no home, no luxury cars, and no family trust fund to bail you out. Your personal assets will be liquidated to clear the debt. You are 62 years old. You are physically healthy and you have over 30 years of business experience. Laura leaned down slightly, echoing the exact tone and posture her father had used against her 8 years ago at the family dinner table. You can get a job, Arthur, Laura said softly. It builds character. Arthur stood rooted to the floor, completely broken. The harsh words he had spoken so casually to his 22-year-old daughter 8 years ago had returned to crush him with absolute mathematical certainty. There were no loopholes left. There were no legal arguments to make. She held every contract, every deed, and every note. Laura, please. Arthur choked out, holding his chest as if struggling to breathe. Can you at least come to dinner? Just once? Your mother misses you. We just want our daughter back. Laura looked at her father for a long, quiet moment. The anger that had lived in her chest for 8 long years was entirely gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable calm. 8 years ago at that dinner table I gave you a hug and I accepted your decision, Laura said smoothly. That was the last time I was your daughter. Today I am simply your primary creditor. She walked over to her desk and pressed the intercom button. Sarah, Laura said to her assistant, please escort Mr. Marsh to the lobby. We are finished here. Arthur opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at Laura one final time, realizing with devastating clarity that the confident, brilliant woman standing before him was a stranger of his own making. He slumped his shoulders, turned slowly, and walked out of the corner office as the glass door clicked firmly shut behind him. Laura stood by her desk for a few moments, watching the rain wash over the city lights outside. She picked up her pen, opened her active litigation ledger, and quietly turned to the next page. Justice was served. The debt was settled. And for the first time in 8 years, Laura Marsh was completely free.